Our guest for this week's Touch Base in Seoul is Korean-American Julie Henning, who has a rather extraordinary personal backstory, to say the least. Ms. Henning was born in Korea in 1953, a child of an unwed Korean mother and an American soldier, but she was eventually adopted in her teen years by the Pulitzer and Nobel Prize winning American author Pearl S. Buck. With this new start in life in the US, she became a maths teacher, but also continued her adoptive mother's work in advocating for the rights of women and minority groups. That's the short version, but there's so much more to her story, which she writes about in her 2019 memoir, A Rose in a Ditch, which has now been published here in Korea. She joins us now via video call. Ms. Henning, hello, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
It is so pleasure to be here with you today. 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. So, we've given a brief introduction in the opening, but can you introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners in your own words?
Sure. First of all, I am very, very delighted and grateful to be here with you today. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And I am so grateful to God for just how He orchestrated my life. And so my story will be, I was born a child of Korean mother and an American GI near the end of the Korean War. And that in itself just shaped my story. My Oma and I, we lived in a small one-room house with no running water, no electricity, public outhouse, and outside kitchen. And we were often very, very hungry. We looked for free food where we could find, such as dandelions, mushrooms, snails, grasshoppers. I was master at catching grasshoppers. You should try them. It tasted like a roasted nuts. And then I became orphan at the age of 13. And I was truly alone. My mother's side was in North Korea, whom I did not know. And my father's side in America, whom I did not know. And they didn't know about me either. And I remember crying myself to sleep many nights. And I remember praying. I thought there had to be God somewhere. I prayed that God would protect me and provide me with a family someday. And I purposed in my heart to study very hard. I studied while others slept and played, and my effort did not go in vain. I was ranked first out of more than 600 students. I am not very smart. I was just scared. I was lonely. I was hungry. I thought perhaps in education that I might have future. And this was noticed by Pearl S. Buck, the Nobel Prize author, who started Pearl S. Buck Foundation in 6 different Asian countries to help mixed-race children with their education, better nutrition, even in a minor health care. And so when she wanted to see me, and then she asked me, how would you like to come to America to live with me as my daughter? It was like a Cinderella story, truly rags to riches. And all of a sudden, I was living in a house with more than 500 acres of land, swimming pool, tennis court, basketball barn. We had chauffeur, cook, gardeners, secretary, housekeeper. I didn't even have to clean my room. And I was just so grateful for the love and the generosity that I was receiving. And I often think about what my life would have been if Pearl Buck did not intervene. And now I am so blessed with my loving, godly husband, 2 wonderful sons, 2 lovely daughter-in-laws who are daughters of my heart, and 5 most amazing, adorable grandchildren, all boys.
Well, it's an extraordinary Cinderella story that you've told us there. Uh, and thankfully, it has ended with a happy ending. But if we go back to your childhood, you described how difficult it was, but I understand it was even more doubly difficult because you were of mixed race, which was very unfamiliar to Korea at the time.
Yes, when I was growing up, of course, this was in 1950s and 60s. I was often teased, ridiculed, and called many different names because of my American features. And it was very difficult. And I remember thinking, looking myself in the mirror and thinking, why am I made this way? But at the same time, there were many caring, generous people who also helped me as well.
So then, how did you end up meeting Pearl S. Buck, this renowned writer and humanitarian?
Yes, after I finished with sixth grade, we didn't have any means for me to go to school, and I was selling gum and shining shoes on the streets. And Pearl Asbuck Foundation sent a social worker looking for mixed race children like myself, which Pearl Asbuck called us Amerasians,
Hmm.
American Asians. And so I left my mom and I went to live in Pearl Espak Opportunity Center in Seoul, South Korea. And while I was in school, that was when my mother died. And and then I was studying hard, and that's how I was noticed by Pearl Espak.
So sadly, it was after your mother passed away, after trying to give everything for you that she could. But then Miss Pearl S. Buck, she came to the rescue. She took you to the US. What was that like when you did go to the US? Were you perhaps scared at all? It was a new country and a new beginning for you.
Well, it is a new beginning, a new country, but I've always wanted to. I mean, my mother always wanted me to go to America. So this was something that I wanted to do so dearly and to go to my father's land as well. And it was very important to us. And then when I came to America, it was, I everything was so new and
Hmm.
so different, but I knew that I was loved and I was taken care of. What was really difficult was not even knowing the language. And I just kept on smiling. And that was my language.
So when you think back to your childhood, what emotions do you have? As we said, you faced discrimination, marginalization. Did you have resentment when you were thinking back to those days, or was it sadness?
Well, at that time, it was very, very difficult. And I remember sitting on my mom's lap and we would hug each other and cry together. It felt as my mom and I against the world. However, now, as an older woman, looking back and how God has orchestrated my life, I believe that often unknown produces fear, and often fear produces prejudice. You see, at that time, Korean people never saw American looking children, fatherless, nameless, shoeless. They looked at us as a shame their daughters committed.
Hmm.
And so you have to understand. But I've been in contact with Korean people, especially with Mr. Kwon Myeon, the executive director of the Pressbook International, and and he's informing me things are really improving in Korea, and I am so very grateful.
So as I
And I
mentioned,
have no ear, yes, because Korea is my mother's land. It's a land that I was born, that I grew up. It's sacrificial of love of my mom that formed me and shaped me,
hmm.
and I it's my beloved people of Korea.
So as I mentioned, you eventually grew up in the US and became a maths teacher, but you've also been working closely with the Pearl S. Buck International, the foundation established by Pearl Buck herself, which now works to promote her legacy and carry out humanitarian aid. Can you tell us more about the work that you do with the foundation?
Yes, I guess what I've been doing a lot of it is I'm like an ambassador for Press Buck International. So I have many opportunities to speak in interviews with the radio interviews, newspaper articles, numerous times with the national television programs in America, in Korea, in China, speaking at Carnegie Hall in New York, speaking at congressional hearing in Washington, D.C., to try to change the immigration status of American children. And I had numerous, maybe even more than 300 some churches and civic functions, speaking at universities and schools, so I can share the need and the plight of American children, and how people through generosity they can also help sponsor and be the donors of the Peresbug International, so that we can provide better education and better nutrition as well.
And you published your memoir in 2019, as I mentioned, titled A Rose in a Ditch. What led you to write your story, to put it down on paper and publish it in a book?
Well, you know, many times people will say when they hear me share my story, they will say, "Oh, it should be a book. You should write a book." But even prior to that, I was the stories that happen in my life are so etched in my brain and in my mind that I needed to express in words.
Hmm.
I just couldn't hide it. And as you said earlier, I'm a math teacher, and so language is not my forte.
Hmm.
But this was the one story that I needed to tell. And also, this story is not just my story. It is a story of many Amerasians throughout many different countries.
How
And
do you
it's a story of a Peresbach Foundation as well, how they tirelessly work to help meet the needs of the children as well.
how do you think both your birth mother and your adoptive mother would have reacted to the book?
You know, my birth mother, my Amma, she will be so pleased. And also, Mother Pearl will be very, very pleased, because they meant the world to me, and I wanted to honor them and all the sacrifice and the care they have given to me. So I want that story to be told.
And now that story has been told in Korean as well, with the Korean version of the memoir being published now. What do you want Korean readers to take away from your story?
You know what? It is surreal that now that book is in Korean language, and I really do need to thank Mr. Kwon Dek-myeon, Executive Director of Pressbook Foundation, and many people who worked diligently to make this possible. And so, to my Korean readers, it is a story. It is a story of young, poor, mixed race child born in Busan, Korea, and going through many difficulties, and at the same time much love, sacrificial love from my mother, who shaped me. And this story, as I said earlier, it is not my story alone.
Hmm.
This story can be story of so many Amerasians in Korea as well as in many other countries. And and I am just grateful that as they get to read it, and also we all have a story to tell. You and I, we all have a story to tell. And as you get to read this book, you will see how God is working in your life because God loves us and He has a plan and purpose for us. And what else is so incredible is that now this book is also in the process of becoming a movie. And so people can also see it someday.
Oh, wow. So I didn't know it was becoming a movie. That must be exciting for you as well.
Yes, I am so very grateful how God is orchestrating my life.
And finally, will you be coming to Korea soon? Have you visited Korea since your childhood? And what is it like when you come here?
Yes, the time that I went to visit Korea, I went with my husband at 2001. We were asked to go to Korea to present Pearl as Buck Woman of the Year award to Korean president's wife, Madam Lee Hee-ho. And and it was incredible when I touched Korean soil. You cannot believe the emotions that ran through my myself.
Hmm.
And also we were able to go to the Blue House, and Madam Lee Hee-ho, she was so gracious. Would you believe, while we were taking numerous pictures, she held my hand the whole time. And what a wonderful thing that was. But to go back to my homeland and touch the Korean soil.
Hmm.
And also I was able to meet with old friends from Pearsburg Foundation Opportunity Center. How good it was to see them and to hug them and to talk to them and laugh and cry together.
Yes, living from a single room house in Busan in the 50s to making it all the way to the presidential office in your lifetime. It is an absolutely extraordinary story to learn about today. A Rose in a Ditch is available now in English and Korean, and we've been speaking to its author, Julie Henning. Ms. Henning, thank you once again for making the time to share your story with us today.
Thank you so very much and God bless you and 대단히 고맙습니다.
감사합니다.